airwaves of the BBC, who got promoted and who got transferred. It was set up by the bloodlines to further their private aims. And I do not believe anything, and it's just my opinion, but I do not believe anything has changed since then. The British Cabinet Office is openly speaking about its control of the world's thinking and the thinking of the British people, and they're labelling parts of the brain under the label of mind space. And there's it's a snapshot from it, but I'm now going to jump off, and again this will be in the link in the description below, because this is, I think, another 80-page report from the Cabinet Office, as you can see there, on exactly the playbook that we've experienced not just over the last 2 years but the last few decades and going forward. Let's take a look at what the British Cabinet Office decide or believe that is the best course for the rest of this livestock. So this is the Cabinet Office's publication, Mindspace, which you saw there. I'm not going to go through all of it, obviously, because it's 96 pages long, and I will leave a link in the description below so you can download it yourself. But again, the Cabinet Office, and it can see quite clearly here, influencing behaviour through public policy. So they're openly saying, the Cabinet Office, that we are going to influence your behaviour. And there I thought we lived in a democracy. Why would you even ask for a document like this and the research like this if you were absolutely transparent in your democratic dealings? Anyway, let me scroll down. You can have a look through. Let's have a look what we got here on the forward executive summary, which is basically all we're going to have a look at anyway. And look at this, a user's guide to what affects our brains, examples of mind space in public policy, applying mind space to policy making. Now, it all sounds very rosy the way they put it across, but it's basically the playbook for manipulation. And written by Cabinet Secretary, Head of Home Civil Service. Oh no, this is just the foreword, okay. Sir Gus O'Donnell and Sir Michael Bichard. Okay, so about the authors, and there's a whole raft in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can read that for yourself. And about this report, they asked for it in 2009. We are now in 2022. And the executive summary. So they speak openly about influencing behaviour is central to public policy. Really? Recently, there have been major advances in understanding the influences on our behaviour, and government needs to take notice of them, and the report aims to make that happen. So, recently, many books and reports have highlighted the potential benefits that behavioural approaches can bring to public policy. In other words, our ideas. This report is not just an overview of theory, it addresses the needs of policymakers by condensing the relevant evidence, demonstrating how behavioural theory can help, showing how governments can build behavioural theory into its current policy making, and exploring the important issues around the need for public permission. Yeah, so they've got the mind space checklist for policy makers, and it goes down. Here we have a very quick one. With this in mind, we set out 9 of the most robust, non-coercive. Really? Yeah, like the lockdowns, the masks, you can't travel, non-coercive. Influences on our behaviour, captured in a simple mnemonic, mind space. So it spells mind space all the way down here. Very good. Which can be used as a quick checklist. Messenger, we are heavily influenced by who communicates information, which is why MI5 vet people on the BBC. You see? Now it works. Okay. So, in other words, we can get pop stars, movie stars, all of these types of, what would you call them? I don't know. Influencers, celebrities, call them what you will, anchormen, women, whatever. But they're placed in those positions where they've got huge platforms. Incentives. Our response to incentivize are shaped by predictable mental shortcuts such as strongly avoiding losses. So now you understand. This is perfect. Again, I'm going to transfer the idea of this. Incentives. So here's a couple of incentives that this Our responses to receive incentives is shaped by predictable mental shortcuts, such as strongly avoiding losses. So how about the loss of your liberty, the loss of the ability to travel without having to prove your vaccination passports, the loss of your liberties and freedoms if you contravene the draconian laws that were used in the last 2 years on a false premise, and all of those other things. So yes, avoiding losses, that playbook is being played out. Norms, we are strongly influenced by what others do. So if we can use, number one, the messenger to influence a shit ton of people and then avoid losses or be installing fear, because let's face it, avoiding losses is another way to say installing fear, because it's usually the fear of loss of something. So fear is the predominant emotion driving those mental shortcuts. And then we are strongly influenced by what others do. No, I am not, but that's just me. Defaults. We go with the flow of preset options. No, I don't, but let's be honest, a majority of people do. Salience. Our attention is drawn to what is novel and seems relevant to us. Well, yeah, we all tend to do that, but that allows the controlling party to simply change the metaphors and similes on how that message is actually given to people. Like this, the attempt by the World Health Organization recently, changing the name monkeypox to some long-lettered scientific-sounding name, which would sound more scary. Let's go back to incentives. And priming. Our acts are often influenced by subconscious cues, and that's exactly why we had an everyday ramping up the draconian laws pushed in, like Build Back Better, and having 3 people standing on a podium, at least here in the UK, telling us to protect the NHS, protect this, stay at home, and etc, etc. Okay, so that's the priming. And then affect. Our emotional associations can powerfully shape our actions. Again, one of the most powerful that they use every single day of the week is fear. You notice everything that we look at is fear-based of some description. And then commitments. We seek to be consistent with our public promises and reciprocated acts. In other words, yeah, they're going to be consistent, which is why they're going to feel that better. Ego. We act in ways which make us feel better about ourselves. In other words, we've dodged a bullet, we're not as fearful as we were before, etc, etc. So there's your mind space. And again, this is 96 pages, and it talks about gang membership, how inertia helps save and blah, blah, so on and so forth. And it goes into great detail. Again, I will leave a link in the description below, but believe me, this is so detailed. It literally is a manual of how to influence a nation. And personally, I think that the very existence of this, spoken about in the context of the Cabinet Office and in a democracy, is absolutely disgusting, underhanded and immoral. But that, again, is just my opinion. Let's get back to the original one. So here we go back onto Mindspace. So that's a real thing, guys. It's a real thing. So their document even says, if people agree with the behavioural goal, they may object to the means of accomplishing it. The different Mindspace effects will attract different levels of controversy. There are several factors that determine controversy. So it goes on, the goal is therefore to make sure that citizens don't fully realise that their behaviour is being changed, or at least how it's being changed. Which is why we, governments tend to target the little ones, because as history dictates, if you have a child from the youngest years up until about 5 to 7 years old, then basically you've created the pattern by which they will live their lives. Excuse me, let me just have a sip of tea. Clearly this opens the government up to charges of manipulation. People have a strong dislike of being tricked. This dislike has a psychological grounding, but fundamentally it is an issue of trust in government. A lack of conscious control also has implications for consent and freedom of choice. First, it creates a greater need for citizens to approve the use of behavioural change, perhaps using new forms of democratic engagement. The point being is, how would you know? Okay, how would you know that change is being forced upon you, let alone being asked to approve it? Obviously, we don't. In this model, democracy is the highest good that is sold, but the levers of manipulating democracy are in the hands of the cartel. Exactly. Rainer Fulmich, I'll just say Rainer, so he's asking questions, sorry. Rainer's asking Alex Thompson. And Alex Thompson is the investigative journalist from Canada, by the way. But he says, is that correct that the City of London is the real powerhouse in the UK? And Alex Thompson, without doubt, this is something that if you've had my background, sorry, I think Alex Thompson's is MI5, sorry. You learn at boarding school, let alone university, and by the time you get into the civil service, there is a lot of eye-rolling if you ever suggest that the people of Britain or any other country in the Commonwealth have self-determination. Yeah, exactly. They know it and we know it. Well, at least, hopefully, my channel. Subscribers and viewers. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It helps me, and like it. The City of London is understood to own the population, body, mind, and soul. Rainer. Ultimately, it's the control of the people's mind that the City of London really wanted to further their goals of world domination. Is that correct? Yes. So ultimately, what we're seeing is a very powerful institution, City of London, which bridges the Atlantic because of its fifth column they have in Wall Street. Those two powers united are the centre power of this world. He goes on to say, Alex, that is, there are struggles. For a long time, there was a completely non-trivial Cold War with branches of the aristocracy in the City of London being both pro and anti-Soviet Union. I could talk for hours just about that, but that is secondary to the determination that there must be only a German bloc and a Russian bloc in Eurasia, and that both of these ultimately must be controlled and hemmed in by the British or Anglo-American sea power and Anglo-American soft power setting the paradigms for them. Which is probably why the roots of what we're now seeing in Ukraine has actually started, and Russia is basically pushing back on effectively surrounding it with military and seagoing power might and trying to pull Ukraine into that. So we've got this encroachment, basically. I mean, what we've got going on that's surrounding Russia at the moment as far as the NATO forces are concerned and all of the other Western powers is nothing less than what's going on in the Middle East, where Israel has been and still is encroaching on Palestine's sovereign land. This is no different. It's just a slightly different day of the week. Another thing that I wanted to clarify is you mentioned that it is just a few families who really run the City of London. You mentioned the names of Rothschilds and Rhodes and Astor. But is it true that just a few families who are trying to dominate the world through the City of London? And MI5 goes on to say, yes, I have never found better material than that of a writing duo, which is Dutch, German, American. The Dutchman is Robin de Ruyter, and his American co-author is Fritz Springmeier from South Carolina. They have a rather shocking book entitled Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Now, this is from MI5, guys, but their work is solid. Now, that's one of the publications, apart from the Mindspace one, that I've got for you on my website, completely free. I didn't write it, these guys wrote it, and a lot of you have already sort of downloaded it from my site already, but I'll leave a link directly to it in my description below, and perhaps you might actually buy a few of my books while you're there. Who knows, to help support the work. But Bloodlines of the Illuminati is a fantastic read, and as this guy points out here, the work is solid. I have that book, which is in the public domain, and to save you looking for it all over the place, I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can download your very own copy. They constantly show the City of London, Manhattan, and the European continent are very much dominated by a small number of families. Often 13 is given as the top level of these families. Obviously, there are levels below that. The French, for example, often spoke about there's 200 families or the 200 bloodlines that run the deep state. But the senior ones terrorize the junior ones, and the highest you can get up before you disappear into the nebulous claims of Satan running the world, which ultimately I believe he does. But the highest level you can get is a level at which Central European Germanic bloodlines have an uneasy truce with British Isles bloodlines, most of who are now based in the United States. And he goes on to ask, and some of the major means through which these are And one of the major means through which these very few families are trying to dominate the rest of the world seems to be through mind space, which sounds like mind control. Does that mean through psychological operations? He goes on to say, Alex, very much so. No nation got into the game of psychological operations earlier than Britain. As soon as there were formal intelligence agencies in Britain in the Edwardian era, just before the First World War, it was a major concentration. But they borrowed a lot of their insights from Vienna and from Germany, which were leading in the psychological space at the time. So this is a transitional interest in both the Anglo and Germanic areas of world domination at the time to use the tricks of mind space, which again, you've just had a quick sample of. And these were largely perfected when America had unchallenged Germany after 1945, using a lot of Third Reich and Soviet minds who were actually brought over to the United States. Remember, Operation Paperclip. Mind control has been regarded since the days of Edward Bernays and Freud as the most powerful way of controlling action in the real world. If you have that power, you control people who are more numerous, more intelligent, and stronger than yourself. Now, one of the things, and I agree with Freud on this issue, is that it is a powerful way of controlling the actions in the real world. And to that end is why I'm now around about 60, 70 pages through my latest publication. It'll probably come up at about 100 pages. My apologies for mentioning it again, but it's salient because it uses the same tools, but it strips away, or should I say, it is an opposing force to the tools that are being used at this moment in time, the behavioural tools, but in favour of reversing the damage or the perceptions that have already been wrought upon our minds and those of our children. Believe me, it establishes you back where you need to be. It's almost like flushing the psychological system, and when you get to the end of it, there are a couple of what I believe are fantastic solutions that you can action in the real world. But unfortunately, that won't be released until another 2 months at least, because there's a lot more work to do, and it could go into 100 plus pages. Now, so this is about the power and control. You are more numerous, intelligent, stronger than yourself. And again, this is Reiner asking about owning the people. So he's just rounding this up now. Did I hear correctly that you use the term livestock? Is that really how these people view it? The rest of the world. And Alex goes on to say it is explicitly that view. Certainly in the 1990s, when I was as a senior British boarding school, this term was used by the grandsons of City of London seniors. They used the word livestock to describe the British population. How lovely. They are considered cattle and do not deserve a place in the world other than under the direction of these British elites. So, we're on 15 pages. To be honest with you, this section on the City of London alone goes on to about 40 pages. And then we come on to this Matthew. He's a journalist and a lecturer and founder of the Canadian Patriot View and the Rising Tide Foundation. He's the author of The Strategic Culture, The Durand, Fort Russ, LA Review Books, China Channel, and also been published on Asia Times. So he's got a good pedigree, and he talks about the allegiance. And I just want to round this episode up really on, now you'll begin to understand what the hell's going on in Canada and with Trudeau at the moment, but I think he's getting a little bit power hungry, or he already has. But this journalist, I just want to deal with this. I will first deal with the present situation to get across what is the British hand in global affairs today. Now, he talks about the oath by Justin Trudeau. I do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, so help me God. And Trudeau goes on to say, I do solemnly and sincerely swear that I shall be true and faithful servant to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And as a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council, remember, we're back in the City of London again for Canada, so he's a representative of the City of London for Canada. I will in all things to be treated, debated and resolved in Privy Council faithfully, honestly and truly declare my mind and my opinion. I shall keep secret all matters committed and revealed to me in this capacity, or that she'll be secretly treated of in the council. Generally, in all things I shall do as faithful and true servant ought to do for Her Majesty, so help me God. What? That is confusing for some people who saw this in 2017. Not what would you expect from a so-called democratic head of state to be doing, taking an oath like that, when he was declaring his oath of office after an election. But then again, Trudeau is not really the head of state. He is a member of the Privy Council office, which you have to be if you're going to be in a cabinet position in the government or in opposition. And he goes on to say the actual head of state is the Governor General, that older gentleman standing next to him, and watch the video, who is the appointee carrying out the emanation of powers and authority of the Crown to give royal assent to the many laws that becomes law in Canada. Now, I'm going to finish it off there because... sorry, let me just finish off with this. Where are we? How much property that they've got, but and then we'll wind it up. So we're talking about the. This is sometimes that we set up in the late 1930s in preparation for the transformation of the British Empire outward image. In other words, most people think that the British Empire has shrunk since the old days of the imperialism and all the rest of it. But today, there are about 54 countries in the British Commonwealth, with the centre being the United Kingdom, and the head of it is the Queen of England, but obviously run by the City of London. And remember, the Remembrancer sits in there to make sure everybody in Parliament and the Royal House do exactly what the bankers in the City of London and those rich families want. It occupies about 12.2 million square miles of territory. 2.4 billion people are represented within those territories. Here, 21% of the world's land area. And people celebrate this as if it's somehow a democratic institution. And there you see the original. So these territories are the Caribbean, a few Latin American areas, a lot of Africa, 19 African nations in sub-Saharan Africa, 8 Asian nations, India being the biggest, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, obviously the Five Eyes, minus the United States. So this is the Commonwealth of Nations as we see it at the moment. But look, if you thought it had shrunk, let's compare this to the old British Empire from the 1920s. You see? Almost totalitarian. People think the British Empire disappeared after the World War II, that it let its territories go free, and that now the empire is the big bad American empire. That's the mythology that's been passed down to us. The real power that controlled the fifth column inside the United States, which has always been there since 1776, has always been in London, and it never disappeared. So let's get back, and I'll round up the episode. If you want me to continue with this narration and add in little bits and pieces of my own, please drop a link here below. There's actually 87 pages contained in all this, but you can have your own copies, read it for yourself, distribute it to whomever you want, and that also includes Bloodlines of the Illuminati and the Mindspace document from the cabinet. All those links will be linked for you below. Let me just round up the episode for you. So, as you saw there, this is not a document of theories or rants by uninformed people. This is research material presented by experts and yet remain, for the most part, hidden from public perception. But now, you know, perception is everything. Like the idea of democracy, which throughout history is simply the public face of tyranny. If you'd like me to cover the rest of this document in a series of episodes so you can listen rather than read, then please drop a comment below. For those of you trying to change the hearts and minds of others, well, good luck with that, since the last 3 years have shown how powerful this Mindspace approach has been and continues to do so. My next book is a reply to such tools, makes use of the same tools to decontaminate the virus of the mind we call faith in our elected leaders. It's all theatre, as you can see, and democracy is the stage upon which the actors play a part, but are always directed from the shadows, reminding us that The Wizard of Oz was a documentary and not a movie. Pop over to my site and grab your copy of this document, the Mindspace and Bloodlines of the Illuminati, all for free. And while you're there, consider supporting my work by purchasing some of my debt-busting tools and other helpful ebooks that you will see there. So, until next time, question everything, believe nothing, and stay curious. And I'll see you on deck very soon.
When we recruited speakers, I had the task of recruiting half the speakers for the Institute, and we had a few criteria. One of which was content knowledge. We carved up the ancient world, the Middle East and North Africa into different topics, and we said, who is an expert on this topic? And then we had to filter it, because as you know, not every expert is always a great communicator, a great educator. So then we said, okay, who's also a good teacher? And so our list got narrower and narrower. And then for the first talk, I not only had those two criteria, I needed someone to start us off with a bang. So this is quite challenging. But I think we have very strongly succeeded. I'm very excited about our first speaker today, Professor Kenneth Carl. I'm going to introduce him. So Professor Carl is a professor of classical and Byzantine history at Tulane University in New Orleans, where he teaches on a variety of topics, Greek and Roman history, Byzantine history, Crusader history. One of the reasons we picked him in particular was he teaches just about everything. In fact, he has recently completed a course. Who's heard of the Teaching Company? I see a few hands. I think it's possible, from my own private research, that Professor Harl is the most widely published teacher of the Teaching Company, with 11 courses done so far. And if you've never heard of the Teaching Company, it's basically a remarkable service. They basically record professors. They call it the best college lecturers in the country. They scout out, they look for highly rated teachers. They record courses in 30-minute segments you can listen to on your drive to work. And Professor Harl's done just about everything, which means that he's a great person to think about how the ancient world fits into the world history more broadly. Who's a world history teacher? So I saw a lot of hands go up. To continue, he's also an extraordinary teacher. He's won the Student Body Teaching Award 9 times, which I thought was pretty remarkable, as well as Baylor University's nationwide award for great teachers. So we have a great professor amongst us. He's also done archaeological work in Turkey. He's an expert in numismatics, coins. He works a lot on, he has a new book coming out on Rome and her Iranian foes, so he works not just in the Greco-Roman world we often think about as sort of located in the Italian, the peninsula there, the Greece, but also in Iran and Turkey. And I was going to plug a few of the Teaching Company courses: Origins of Great Ancient Civilization, Barbarian Empires of the Steppes, Rome and the Barbarians, Great Ancient Civilizations of Asia Minor. Please join me in welcoming a wonderful first speaker. I'm just going to wire you up.
Yeah, put the pressure on.
Okay, so you can put that in your pocket.
I think the easiest thing is in here, and then you can clip it right up here. That's how we usually do it.
Okay.
I'm a trainable primate.